everyone. My name is Colleen Corbett, and on behalf of Shrewsbury SEPAC, I'd like to welcome everyone to our Special Education Parent Information Zoom webinar. In a moment, Meg Belzito, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, will introduce her team and present updates and information about how special education services will be delivered through different learning models as our schools reopen. Participants can submit questions through the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the school's website. Lastly, thank you to Meg and her team for participating in this webinar, as well as my fellow CPAC volunteers, Jill, Blake, and Ashley. And thanks also to the district for allowing us to use this platform. Take it away, Meg.
Oh, thank you, Colleen. So I'm Meg Belzito. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, and I'm here tonight with a number of unbelievable colleagues and supports that we have in our district, and I'd like to share actually who's here. So right now, to my right on my screen, I have Meg, who I'll have her introduce herself first.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Meg Bartlett. I'm the Assistant Director of Special Education and Pupil Personnel Services. It's lovely being here tonight.
Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Herrick. I'm the Director of Specialized Programs, and thank you for having us tonight. And Jackie? Yeah. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Jackie Marcello. I'm the Director of Special Education Pre-K through 4, and so happy to see everybody here tonight.
Hi, I'm Patty Waterhouse. I'm the Director of Middle School Special Education. Also happy to join tonight.
And I'm Megan DeLeon. I'm the Director of High School Special Education at Shrewsbury High School. Thank you for having us.
So the first thing I'd like to do is actually just welcome Lindsay Heffernan from our school committee, who's here tonight, as well as Dr. Sawyer. Before we begin talking through the slides that we've prepared for the community, Lindsay, I think you just wanted to say a couple things. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Meg, but most importantly, thank you, Colleen and the team for getting this together and organized and continuing to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to outreach to parents and make sure that they understand what's happening in this new world order and how we can better and best continue to serve. So I only joined the school committee a little over a year ago, and I won't lie, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster year, but when coming on, many of you know Erin Canzano, who previously served as the liaison for CPAC, and I immediately reached out to our chair, Sandy Fritz, and said, I would love to serve in that role, and for a couple of different reasons. I have a child with special needs, and so I can appreciate a parent's perspective in trying to navigate and figure out what is best and what the world might look like. But also because professionally, I served for many years helping young people and families try to access services when I was previously practicing as a lawyer in some of the juvenile courts. And so I've just seen some families really struggle. I'm going to say never with the Shrewsbury district, so that's good. But can appreciate that things can get yucky and messy, and that's not what any of us really want. And we want to figure out the right path for people. So on behalf of all of the school committee, both Chair Sandy Fritz, our Vice Chair John Wensky, our Treasurer Gail McGee, and Jason Pallich, I think I could definitely say that we are looking to ensure that all of our children feel like they are able to both access our curriculum, but more importantly to thrive and make sure that we have a really good partnership with families. As we try to figure out this new world, I think we're all trying, it's bumpy and rocky, and more rocky than any of us want it to be. So I'm glad we can have this opportunity tonight to answer questions and to hear what you're all thinking, and as we need to continue to kind of pivot and swerve and figure out, there I'm sure are things that we haven't thought of yet that we as a district need to do better on, and as we continue to communicate, we'll hopefully improve. So I really just thank you for having us all here, and I hope for all the 116 participants, I'm so glad you're all here, that we can make sure we answer as many questions as you all have tonight. So why don't I turn it over to you, Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Heffernan. I just first want to thank the CPAC leadership team for having this webinar this evening. I think it's an important opportunity for our parent community, and on behalf of everyone in our school district, I want to thank you first for attending this evening, and I also want to communicate to you that we are deeply committed to meeting your children's needs to the best of our ability. We know that the pandemic and the school closure has been particularly challenging, for students with disabilities as well as their families. I'm grateful for the many ways in which you as parents have supported your students over these past months, and for the special educators and support staff who have really worked tirelessly under very complex circumstances over the spring, during the closure, during the extended school year program this past summer, and as well as the intensive preparation work that they're doing right now to open the new school year. Regardless of which learning program your child will be in, we will certainly do our best under these challenging circumstances to provide them with the supports that they need to be successful. So I'm looking forward to tonight's webinar. This is an unbelievable leadership team that we have in our Student Services Department. They are very talented, and they are, I just am reminded every time I interact with them how deeply committed they are to your children. So again, looking forward to the webinar, and I appreciate being part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. And I too thank the SEPAC board, and their communication over the past months has been extremely helpful to hear the questions and concerns that the community might have regarding children with special needs. And during the closure, I too recognize that it's been very difficult and challenging for some families. And we recognize that the reopening of schools causes a lot of anxiety possibly. And it also can also be a time for us to reflect on what we did see successfully over the summer. So we'll talk a little bit about that during the presentation as well. So with that, I'd like to start to share my screen. Oh. All right, can everybody see?
Yep.
Awesome. So tonight we have our special education parent information session. Here are just a couple photos from the in-person summer services. And we thought they were extremely happy pictures for us to share with you as we start to look at how instruction looks different in our new learning models. So tonight on our agenda, I would like to talk to you about some district updates and special education priorities. We'll talk a little bit about the guidance from the Department of Education, special education within the different learning models, specific updates around what our district efforts have been to date, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions for us to answer. So, as far as district updates, as you all know, the school committee voted to reopen the district in a hybrid model. The district submitted our final plans to the Department of Education in August. We have 4 different cohorts in our reopening plan. We have Cohort A. In Cohort A are students who are prioritized for in-person services, and the determination of students who will be in this cohort has already been finalized. So when we started these slides, we were still working through some things. Cohorts B and C, students will be in school on Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday with remote learning on Wednesday. And Cohort D, students will be fully remote by family preference, and parents completed this through the family survey, and that information has also been finalized as of Tuesday afternoon. Our special education priorities, just like Dr. Sawyer has talked through the closure about the key messages of the district, we are also thinking about maintaining the health and safety, of course, of all of our staff and our students, meet the needs of our students and implement IEP services, flexibility in scheduling and IEP service delivery, and most importantly, family engagement. With that, I'll turn it over and talk, some of the directors will talk about the special education and health and safety guidance with the Department of Education.
Excellent. So up first is Patty Waterhouse.
Thank you. The Department of Education guidance began coming out in the spring, came a little bit more fast and furiously in the summer, and was finalized in late July and August. And the guidance is that students receive services no matter what their learning environment. So this is a change that we've had from the spring, where consultation was a bigger part of what we were providing. At this point, we are prepared to provide IEP services to students no matter what learning environment they're in, and we are working through the details of that right now. There's an emphasis on in-person services to the extent possible while still abiding by the health and safety guidelines. We have put a heavy emphasis at the recommendation of the Department of Ed on prioritizing in-person services, especially for our preschool children, as well as those students with significant and complex needs. And finally, the special education services may need to be delivered differently during the pandemic than they do under normal circumstances. And I wanted to give you an example. So if you had a student that might be receiving inclusion services, so that would mean that a special educator was supporting your child or multiple children within a general education class. On the days that cohort B or C are working remotely, the students in the general education classroom may be working asynchronously, which means they might be working independently on an assignment. The special education teacher would be providing supports even on those remote days to the students with IEPs. But that is really no longer an inclusion support because the other students that are not on IEPs are not present while the special educator is working with the smaller group of students on an IEP. So we're still providing the service, it just might look a little bit different. Next, the guidance on health and safety. It's important for us to remember that no one strategy is going to minimize the risk. It's really the combination of all of the strategies and all of the practices that we're putting into place. So the combination of hand washing, social distancing, staying home when you're sick, minimizing mixing of students across different cohorts. It's really the totality of all of those practices that, that will minimize our risk.
Great. And so the next section is special education in the different learning models. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about this with the help of some of my colleagues. And again, Patty, thank you. You did a great job setting this up. So simply, for the pure and simple fact, all students will receive the services in their IEP. So that, like Patty indicated, the resources and supports are no longer considered free appropriate public education as outlined within your IEP. At this point, the services that are there are going to be the services we render. However, as we've discussed, the learning environment has shifted. So we have students that are in person, hybrid, and remote. So what we're asking our staff to do, part of the professional development that we've given them this week, is to how we would like them to document that in a learning plan. And in order to do that, please note that all families with students with IEPs, students with disabilities, you will have your liaison be contacting you before your child comes on campus so that they can talk to you about how your child engaged in remote learning in the spring and how we can adjust the IEP services. So it's not going to make any changes to your IEP that's active. It does not require an amendment. What we're going to do is we're just going to document when your child is not on campus, how we will deliver that service, who will deliver that service, if there's any changes that need to be made to any accommodations. For instance, if your child had a scribe down under your present levels of educational performance, at this point we may say, well, scribe might not work, but we're going to install text-to-speech software on your child's iPad. So we're just going to document those small nuances with engagement from you to solicit your input, as well as provide you a visual schedule of when your child will be receiving the specially designed instruction. So that, again, it is in effect for students in cohorts B and C. As we described, these are the students who will be on campus 2 days a week and remote the other 3. So the IEP services may be delivered in person or remotely. In person may be that I have those students in my classroom, or I take them to my office, or that I'm doing live Zooms with them, providing the direct instruction. There is going to be flexibility with this. We are working with our staff through professional development during these days around how we can do that, how we can think outside the box and use our creative inspirations to make sure we're giving them these services. But again, please note, we are doing this with the guise of maintaining health and safety requirements. We're talking about services that may now take place in the art room that may have been direct instruction, maybe taking a reading group outside on a nice day. But again, the services as outlined in your service delivery grids will be provided. And up next, I do believe, is Kristen Herrick.
Great, yes. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Cohort A. Cohort A is our in-person model. The district is prioritizing in-person instruction for preschool age students and students with significant and complex needs. Cohort A consists of two groups. So we have Cohort A1 and Cohort A2. In Cohort A1, students will have the opportunity to be in school full day on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And on Wednesdays, Cohort A1 will participate in half morning in-person services and half day afternoon remote services. For Cohort A2, students will have the opportunity to be in school on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday with remote services on Wednesday. Families that have students that were prioritized as Cohort A also had the opportunity of selecting fully remote or a hybrid model.
Great, and Megan?
Yes, so in terms of how the district determined who to prioritize for in-person learning, we followed the guidance that was provided by the Department of Education that encouraged us to prioritize particular subgroups of students for full in-person instruction. So if you see below, students with disabilities and students with English language learning needs were those prioritized with as coming in person. So in terms of looking at their IEP on their grid, we were looking at the high needs where services are provided outside the general education classroom, and special education services constitute more than 75% of the student's school day. In addition, we were looking at students who are dual diagnosed as both special education and ELL with intensive needs. We also prioritize students whose parents and caregivers reported that they do not have access to reliable internet or suitable learning space at home, particularly our students who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. Finally, we looked at prioritizing students who were disengaged and who struggled significantly during previous remote learning periods as a result of their disability and as evidenced in their work production throughout the spring.
And Jackie.
Jackie.
So across the various schools, we have begun to identify some of these students who are at risk for learning challenges. We are in the process of determining how to best address these challenges by collaborating with families to understand and respond to these specific needs. This may include more in-person instruction if necessary and if feasible, based on the space, the staff, and being able to adhere to health and safety requirements.
Engagement is something that is so important to us during this time. For all our students with disabilities, families will be contacted, as Meg described earlier. We'll be talking to families again about these learning plans, the schedules for your children, and what it will look like, whether they're in person, hybrid, meaning 2 days a week and 3 days remote, or fully remote. The district anticipates and it is prepared to adjust to the changing needs of our students and community. This ongoing engagement between all of us will be so important and will be essential to the development and implementing of plans that meets the needs individually for every single student. We also are talking with our staff, and we also want to talk with all of you when you are contacted by the school about flexible solutions for reducing the mixing of student groups. So part of the questions that we're thinking about We have students in Cohort A that will be in person. These students, they may receive services outside of the general education classroom, but they also have opportunities for inclusion in the general education classroom. So we do know that if we hold to the health and safety parameters of physical distancing, hand washing, the mask wearing, things of that nature, we will be able to have students in Cohort A join B or join C specifically with those parameters in place and with the support that they would need. We continue to work through those plans as we look at the different spaces in our building to ensure that we can do this in the safest way possible. One thing we really wanted to make sure that the community understood is that all IEP meetings will be held virtually at this time. And we're doing this because visitors into the building are strongly discouraged. Although what we are trying to get across to families is that we're still very willing to meet virtually, and that's how we will begin the school year. And we also, one last thing, want to make sure that we address that there is a backlog of evaluations, and we recognize that from the spring, and we will be in touch with families about the scheduling testing as soon as possible. So with that, we're going to give some specific updates from across the district. Starting
with Kristen Herrick talking about our successes with our extended school year.
Yes, our extended school year program was a huge success. We had a 6-week program that ran this summer. The first 2 weeks of the summer program, all students received remote services. And the last 4 weeks of the program, we had a combination of remote and in-person services. So to make that happen, we had a number of staff working in our program. These staff were positive and excited to see students, and the program would not have been a success without them. I'd like to just personally thank the coordinators that worked in the program. We had Janet Murphy and Mario Gonzalez and Bridget Nichols, who really did pioneer this new program with social distancing rules and keeping our students safe. Students that participated in the program, we had a number of students come in person, 78 students, and these students were engaged in learning. And really was the highlight of our summer. We had successful interactions with students. Students were engaged in learning. And I really think that it was a successful program, and I thank all that participated to support the students.
Thanks, Kristen. And up next is going to be Jackie Marcello, who's going to inform everybody about the ongoing professional development that we've been doing.
Yes, we've been fortunate to well, our first week is almost over, but the 10 days at the start of the school year has allowed us to engage in some great professional development. Special educators have received the PD on topics such as learning in a socially distanced environment, collaborating with families on learning plans, mindfulness and self-care, providing services in a hybrid and remote model, an environment, supporting our students socially and emotionally. Paraprofessionals also have received professional development with the district's clinical coordinators and have had opportunities for many PDs in the use of technology and educational apps, community building in the hybrid and remote models, getting to know students and families, professionalism, social emotional learning supports, and trauma-informed practice ideas.
Thanks, Jackie. Megan, can you tell us the work that we've been doing around our spaces within our schools?
Sure. So for the past several weeks, we've had a group of professionals, including building administrators and teachers, carefully analyzing all of the spaces that are used as learning areas throughout all of the schools. Some of our special education spaces may need to be shifted so that we can make sure that we have all of the safety parameters in place in terms of spacing and distance between the professional and the student. So again, as Meg mentioned, thinking creatively about reusing some of our spaces like an art room or holding sessions outdoors so that we can ensure that students are still receiving their services while adhering to all of the safety guidelines. So teachers have had a lot of input in terms of how they want their classroom set up, and will continue to monitor that as we continue our professional development next week to ensure that everyone feels comfortable and safe within their environment and that our students will be able to learn successfully within them.
Thanks, Megan. And then finally, Patty, schedules, caseloads, and class assignments.
So we all know in a year that's not this year, you would already know your child's teacher and you would already know their class assignments. Things are a little bit later this year. As you know, also the parent portal closed just this Tuesday. We spent weeks looking at every IEP for every one of your children, every child in the district who has an IEP. We reviewed those thoroughly to determine who and how many students we could safely bring back as frequently as we could. I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about parents not knowing whether they are in Cohort A or not. So I wanted to let people know that we have already reached out to parents whose children met the criteria and the guidelines from the Department of Education to be in Cohort A. So those parents have already been notified. If you have not received that notification, then your choice on the parent portal was between Cohort B or C, and that's based on the alphabet and where your last name or your child's last name falls in the alphabet, or Cohort D, which is all remote. So at this point now we have all of the parent choices, and now we're working on matching the individual needs of your children with the teams of teachers who can meet those children's needs. We're working with liaisons and service providers on considerations for class placements, team placements, scheduling, and our liaisons will be in touch with you to talk about those things very soon. Thank you.
This last slide, although a little blurry, speaks to a very important initiative in our district that we began a number of years ago. And although the pandemic has definitely changed how our programs and our instruction might look and feel to many of us, we are still keeping our mission and our vision, where we would do anything to have that group of kids back and presenting to our school committee. And we look forward to that day when we can again have students with and without disabilities talking about how they love being on the unified club and the unified sports teams together. And thinking about our mission and vision, we have hope, and we continue to remember our priorities during this time. The research still states that children do well when they are together, and that is our hope, and we continue to do everything possible to have our kids back in school in the safest way possible. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can answer some questions in the chat.
Great, thanks, Meg. So it seems as though, like Patty had indicated, there are several questions about how would you know if you're in Cohort A1 or A2? How would you have been notified?
So we sent out 2 communications. The first went to Cohort A1, and that went through School Messenger, and the email was from myself. And based on that information, from there, we took a look at our numbers further, and we were able to have Cohort A2, which again, parents could not request Cohort A. Cohort A was something that we had to, as Patty described, look at every single IEP in the district against the guidelines from the Department of Education and make some very difficult decisions around who meets that criteria. After that, I again sent out an email recently indicating who we could then bring in for Cohort A2. And that again went through School Messenger as you receive your messages from either your building principal or Dr. Sawyer. So that's the avenue we use to alert families.
And just so, how would they, I guess just a clarifying question about School Messenger. Is it a phone call or is it an email?
It's an email.
Excellent, thank you.
And I just wanted to add on something that Megan said earlier and Meg said now. We have had principals and assistant principals and other faculty and staff in our buildings with tape measures in classrooms and literally measuring out the spaces to get as many desks in those classrooms as we can and still meet the guidelines. We want to bring back as many students as we possibly can in person, but we don't want to do that at the risk of someone's health. So we have to make sure that we are meeting all of the requirements, which is why we couldn't say everyone can come back full time.
And again, I just want to clarify, if you are hybrid or if you are home on Wednesday afternoon, you will have your liaison be reaching out to you to discuss what your child will be doing during those times. Jackie, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about preschool and how that would look.
Yes, so preschool, per the DESE guidelines, was identified as a complex need learning student body. So any child who is on an IEP plan in the preschool will come to preschool and attend pretty much their regular session, with possibly a few alterations to that liaisons will be reaching out with next week. So that's how they ended up in Cohort A.
And can you talk, so typically in preschool, they also have placements. So if they were going to come on campus for 4 days, would that be the expected amount of time? If that's what their IEP said, would that be what they would receive?
Yes, the expectation is that for all preschool sessions, except the afternoon session is still being worked out.
Great. Kristen, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the wearing of face masks for both students that are younger, as well as students who may be working on a DSense program.
Yeah, certainly our younger students, there are some exemptions from wearing masks, but we are really working with students, families to get kids more comfortable wearing masks. For staff, they're expected to wear their cloth masks. And if there is work that needs to be done in close proximity, we will provide additional PPEs to staff. In addition, we're looking at some plexiglass that can be used so that students can work more face-to-face and directly with staff with that additional protection.
Thanks, Kristen. I was wondering, Megan, if you could speak a little bit on what, at the high school level, and maybe we can toss it over to Patty a little bit as well. Can you tell us how, maybe, first of all, what learning skills class is, and also how that would work for students that either would be on campus, or also how would they access skills if they were remote?
Sure. So learning skills at both the middle school and high school is an opportunity for students to work directly with a special education teacher or paraprofessional on their particular goals. It's often used as an opportunity for pre-teach or reteach of content that the students would have gotten in their general education classroom, as well as a time to work on executive function skills, organization skills, or any study skills that they may need in preparation for upcoming assignments. I did see a couple of questions about how learning skills would be delivered. So I can speak to the high school. In a hybrid model, the student will still have in-person learning skills for the 2 days that they are in the building. They will then have a remote learning skills on the days Thursday and Friday, or Monday and Tuesday when they are home. That learning skills class may be held by a special education teacher or a paraprofessional under the direction and guidance of a special education teacher. So we will still be providing the support whether they are in school or at home. Patty, I don't know if it looks any different at your level.
I think learning skills will be very similar to that. Yes.
Thank you. So I'm also seeing some questions about what if my child is in cohort B and C. So what we are also, and how would they make sure that would they get other services? We want to do this in a very holistic and child-friendly manner. So if that child is on campus with us 2 days a week, we may be providing the specially designed instruction on those remote days as to not make that child come in, miss the bulk of an in-person instruction on campus. So we are going to be very thoughtful, and that's why we're going to be creating these learning plans with consultation with families so that we can have these conversations with you. If we remove the child too much, they may be missing that daily instruction that we know that they all need. So we're going to really balance out your child's week. And that does not mean that we would be issuing you a new IEP. Again, your active IEP remains the same. It does not require an amendment. What we do, we are asking for two-way family engagement in order to make that learning plan as successful for your child as possible. And those services will continue to be rendered. In terms of evaluations, Meg, I wonder if you could answer this question for us. If you have if your child, sorry, we've been talking to teachers a lot, so sorry about that. If you have a child that's due to be evaluated in the fall or perhaps even early winter, will they continue to be evaluated even given the backlog?
Yes. So I can talk for a minute about the timelines around testing. So the first official timeline would start on September 15th. So the clock, as we always refer to in our world, it's ticking. So we have two things we're dealing with. We have the backlog of evaluations, which we have essentially a very long list, and we had a very limited amount of testing that we were able to accomplish over the summer when it was feasible. We did start to have some of our psychologists work with students to start some of that testing. We did not get through nearly all of it. It's hundreds. And then we also have the timelines that will begin upon that September 15th. I'll use an example. So over the summer, if you received an outside evaluation for your child and you wanted to share that with the district will still have 10 days to meet with you from September 15th. So the team chair will be in touch with you. We'll schedule that meeting. We'll review that evaluation. As far as testing goes, when you sign consent, we have 30 working school days in order to complete the evaluations, and from there 45 to then schedule a meeting, unless there's an agreement between the school and the parents regarding the scheduling of the meeting or even actually the testing. So to back up about the testing that should have been completed, parents in the school district should have a conversation about what that looks like. Some families chose to wait until the fall. Some families want to actually think about testing in a different way. So in thinking about your child, if your child was supposed to have an evaluation and now coming into this school year, an important conversation would be with the team chair at the building level, as well as the liaison. If your child already has a consent that has been signed and it's active, that clock will start.
Thanks, Meg.
I know it's a little complicated, but we are working really hard on that process because we know that we not only have the backlog, but we also know what students are due and then what students are also new to us. For example, our preschool, I know that we have at least 16, right, Jackie, of initial evaluations already for our youngest children turning 3. So.
And I also just want to be transparent. That might be part of the conversation that your liaison may have with you, especially at a younger developmental level where your children have been home with you for an extended period. We want to just make sure we're balancing reintegrating into a school, learning what new school looks like, as well as the fine line of, is this an appropriate time to remove them from the classroom to do psychological or academic and achievement testing? So that may be a conversation they have with you. But again, remember, this is a two-way conversation and your voice does matter. So if you are seeking that evaluation now, that is your request and that is your right, and the consent will be issued. If you are looking to delay it a few months to let your child settle in, that again is okay. That is your right, and we respect your decisions. There are a few more questions about Cohort A. In the Power School, the Cohort A was not listed as a choice. It was hybrid or full remote. If you received a message from Meg Belcito through School Messenger and you had selected hybrid, that does mean that yes, you were entered into the Cohort A if you received the notice from Meg. So you did not have to select a different item. And then Meg, can you talk a little bit, if your child was in Cohort A, who would they be with in the classroom? Who would their peers be? Would they be mixed? Would they be with two different sets of children?
So Cohort A, it really is individualized. So some of our students in Cohort A are a part of our ELC program, our Educational Learning Center. So they might be spending the majority of the day in that particular classroom. Some of the students with our more complex and intensive needs might be part of the general education more. So they might have, for example, a check-in in our Educational Learning Center, and then they might go into the general education classroom. And actually, Kristen, I should have you speak to this, because this is, Cohort A is very specialized, and that is the work Kristen does across the district.
Yeah, just like you said, the students that are in Cohort A that will be in person, they have individualized plans, and those liaisons will communicate with families to talk about the remote part and just any questions that you might have about the in-person. But we're trying to replicate the services that we that are in the, we're going to replicate the services that are in the IEP, but with consideration about some of the environments in which we do it, and making sure that students are safe.
Can you speak a little bit more, Kristen, about perhaps students, I'm thinking specifically maybe within our educational learning centers, our ELCs, they may have additional adult support. How will that additional adult support assist the children during the fall?
Yeah, so the adult support that's provided for children varies. We have some students that are receiving some direct instruction, repetition through discrete trial with a paraprofessional. In other contexts, the paraprofessional is supporting the student in the classroom to access the environment, the teacher, and the instruction that's happening in there. Those services will look the same in our in-person service plan, you know, again, with the safety guidelines in place. So various models.
So again, so if your child has perhaps an ABA technician or a child-specific aid, that staff member will still be supporting your child, both in person when they are with us, as well as remote. When the children are remote through the learning plan, we'll consult with you and see what activities maybe your child may be able to do independently, and what in addition to that they may need additional prompting or guidance on.
There's several Cohort D questions that we might want to just maybe lump into one. Things about meeting with liaisons, like how family communications will go if you're fully remote, how they might get some information on how the remote might look, and how an evaluation would be done if a child was in Cohort D.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if you're in Cohort D, you are still a Shrewsbury Public School student, and you still have your IEP, and you still have a liaison. So regardless of what cohort you are in, you will have that liaison reach out to you to establish how and when the services will occur. And that includes any communication you need from the liaison or classroom teachers as well. That can be part of the conversation. Jackie, you listed a 3-part question. I feel like I'm in an interview.
As far as the testing goes, if your child's in Cohort D, it's actually a conversation we had earlier today. So what that might look like is a conversation with the parent around the opportunity for the child to come in for evaluation purposes. Otherwise, the team in the district would talk with you about any type of evaluation that could be done remotely. It is more difficult. It is something that there are certain evaluations that require checklists or observations as part of the evaluation process. So it will be an important conversation to have. But we certainly recognize for evaluations, there might be a need for your child to come in, and we certainly can talk to you about how to do that in the safest way possible. Did we hit all the Cohort D, Jack?
I think so. I'm looking, just double checking. It was about evaluations, services, when they would be communicated with about what the services would look like.
There is a question, Meg, about how are children with 504s being supported remotely?
So 504s are building-based plans for accommodations for students. So if a student is in Cohort D and has a 504 plan, it really will depend on the type of accommodation that the student has. So for example, if a child has an accommodation like preferential seating, certainly in a remote environment that wouldn't be applicable. But if the student is in the hybrid or in person, it still would be. So the 504 coordinators at every building will make the teachers or liaisons, I should say the teachers, aware of the 504 plans. And then from there, they're going to have to look to see what accommodations have been agreed upon and have a conversation about what that looks like in the learning model that your child's in.
I saw a couple of questions that are specific to the middle level that I'd like to address. One is, if there are children that are learning remotely, whether they are all remote as part of Cohort D, or whether they're on their at-home days as part of Cohorts B or C, what will it look like for them? And I just wanted to clarify that every child on an IEP who has services that occur every day will still get services every day. So you can expect that your liaisons will be meeting with your children in a live fashion nearly every day. So I can't say every child will have it every day because everyone's IEP is different, but the liaisons will be following that service delivery. We also have paraprofessionals who can at times support students in their inclusion classes in school. They will also be available to be working with your children while your children are at home. So they can do things like make sure that your child has all the links he or she needs in order to access the assignments. Make sure that they have all their materials. Make sure that they understand what is the first step to get started on this project. Give them extra help that they need in order to accomplish those projects. These are things that will be happening regularly and on a daily basis this fall that were not really in place as much in the spring. And another question that I saw was specific to co-taught classes and how those will work. So I wanted to point out that one of the hallmarks of our co-taught model is the embedded collaboration and planning between the special education teacher and the general education teacher, and that won't change. So the benefits of that are that the special education teacher knows the needs of the students and can help to make sure that the instruction designed for everyone is designed to meet the needs of the children that are on IEPs in that classroom. So that won't change. Some of the things that will change is that we won't have the freedom to be moving children around in the classroom like we do in a non-COVID time. We can't pull a small group necessarily from the middle of the classroom to work on another skill. So those things we're working through the details. But one of the benefits of those 2 remote days that your children will have, or 2.5 remote days, is that the liaison will then be able to do a special class when your child's at home and be providing that specially designed small group instruction by Zoom that's covering, reteaching, or pre-teaching some of the concepts that are covered in class.
There was one last Cohort D question was about, would the school day start like a regular school day? Yes. The answer to that is yes. There could be assignments that are asynchronous that you could do at a different time, but there will be some synchronous Zooms and live stuff that will be happening during the school hours.
And for children that are in cohorts B and C, we will be asking them to follow the same schedule when they're on their at-home days that they follow when they're in school. That will help our children maintain their structure of their day and their routines. And it will also be a mechanism that allows our staff to be working with your children. That's how they'll do their scheduling. If the time that they will be working with your child is at 9 o'clock, that will be at 9 o'clock whether they're in school or 9 o'clock whether they're at home.
And Patty, that's important for the high school students who are in Cohort D as well, where most of the instruction will be delivered asynchronously. The liaison will be helping to provide that level of structure to schedule their days accordingly while they are at home working remotely.
The little piece of paper. Because
There was a question about homework helpers at the middle level. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to have the homework helpers program. However, I do believe that there'll be enough interaction with the liaisons and the paraprofessionals, even when our children are on their at-home days, that I really believe that we're going to be able to manage that with you and your children a little bit better. And if you're finding that homework is very difficult to manage, as in any year, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to your liaison and work through those issues. Your liaison is there to support you and can make modifications to the homework if needed.
Are there any other questions that we could answer with the time left? Certainly know that the question feature will be downloaded. We will take a look at that and see if there's anything more specific that we can push out in a frequently asked question document for families to have. Colleen, Ashley, Jill, Blake, is there anything specific on your mind that you'd like us to answer right now? Feel free. Oh, Colleen, I think you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you get a chance to look at those questions I sent you the other day?
Oh, we sure did.
Oh, okay.
Would you like us to go through those?
Yeah, would you mind?
No, not at all. Jackie, were you the one that had the document up on the screen?
I have it up, Meg.
Oh,
Some of them we answered sort of organically as we went through. So there was a question about how does the pandemic impact IEP timelines, which we talked about. We talked about evaluations, so that's been addressed. Someone asked, will students have mask breaks during the course of the day as well as get outdoors for fresh air? And the answer is yes to both of those. There was a question about disinfecting on the school buses in between routes. Does anyone want to talk about that? Dr. Sawyer, that might be a question better answered by you than by special educators.
Sure, thank you. We're working closely with our bus vendor company around all aspects of the transportation piece. We are going to be sending out some specific information to families next week about a variety of health and safety issues relative to school, including buses, cafeterias, those kinds of things. We'll make sure we provide specifics about that.
Thank you. And there was a question, will learning look different for kids in our ELC classrooms regarding adaptive living skills and pre-vocational skills? Megan, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we have definitely been thinking about how we can continue to provide the pre-vocational opportunities as well as some of our daily living skill opportunities safely within the school environment. There will have to be some modifications to the programs that we previously ran, including, for now, our community-based learning trips. We're going to take some time to make sure that everyone feels safe within the school environment and provide as many vocational opportunities there before we bring students back out into the school, but we hope to be able to do that very soon. in terms of some of the other more discrete trial types of ADL skills that students are learning. We will continue to do those as safely as possible with modifications if needed, but we still will provide vocational experiences and continue to promote as many of those opportunities within our school as possible.
And there was a question also about whether we would be trying to squeeze in all of a student's IEP services into the 2 days that they might be in person if they are in cohort B or C. So I think we addressed that, but let's just reiterate that the services will be provided both on the days when students are in person and on the days when they are at home. So we don't have that need to squeeze services in. We will be providing the services across the week, and we will be in touch with you, or your liaison will be in touch with you next week to have conversations so you will understand what each and every day will look like and how services will be provided.
Patty, as part of that conversation at both the middle and high school level, we'll have a conversation with families about the 6 and 7 day cycle. There was a few questions about that in the chat.
Oh.
So we are currently going to be working on a 5-day Monday through Friday schedule. So we'll talk about what the services will look like in that sort of setting.
And yes, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and provide your feedback and your input as well as your thoughts about some challenges that may have happened in the spring that we could maybe do some things a little bit differently this fall. And then the last 2 questions in the questions that were sent in advance had to do with cleaning supplies and I think sort of chemical ingredients in some of those, or individual children's allergies or sensitivities to some of our cleaning products. I don't know that I am qualified to talk about that one as much. What I can say is if you have an individual child that has individual sensitivities or allergies, I would highly encourage you to call the nurse in your building and have that conversation, and the nurse will definitely work with you on alternate cleaning supplies. If you were planning to send those in, we just would want to make sure that they meet all of the health and safety requirements. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about other cleaning supplies or products.
So each classroom will be equipped with hand sanitizer, and also the nurse's office will have the other PPE equipment that might be required by staff. Or for example, if a child is wearing a mask and it ends up wet for some reason or torn or something happens to it, we'll have an abundance of masks in our building for students to use. As far as the cleaning products that are going to be used within the classrooms and throughout the buildings, our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations has been working with the Public Buildings Department very closely to determine what the best products would be, along with our nursing department. Our Director of Nursing, Noelle Freeman, she's phenomenal in putting together the plans. And I will say that next week, I know that she was going to be speaking to Dr. Sawyer today about how to share information with families around our health and safety protocols. I don't know, Joe, if that decision has been made as to when that might come out, but I do know that that will be prior to the start of school.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. We'll be making some level of presentation at next Wednesday evening school committee meeting, and that specific information may go out to families before that, or perhaps the next day on Thursday. But next week, there'll be some other detailed information coming out relative to all the issues, the kind of checks we're asking families to do of their children before they send them to school to make sure that they're not symptomatic in any way, a variety of issues relative to cleaning, sanitizing, buses, cafeteria, how desks, how students move around the school, all those different pieces. And individual schools will be providing some of that information as well directly to their families.
Thank you. So at this time, I'm seeing that we're a little after 8. At this time, I think we'll end the webinar. Please know that we are thinking of all of our students and our families. We look forward to the beginning of the school year. We do know that it will be met with some challenges, but we can't wait for the day that all of the kids are back in school.
Absolutely. Oh, we're counting the days. Sorry, I had to say it.
No, absolutely. I'm glad you did. It reminds me of when we had our first day of extended school year in-person services. We were really nervous and we were wondering, how will families be for the students that qualified for the in-person services, and those cars pulled up and the staff got right out there and the parents had smiles on their faces, and it was a very special moment for us, and we look forward to doing that for more and more students as we can. And if there's anything else, I don't know if Colleen or any of you had anything you wanted to add before I stop our webinar.
No, thank you though.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it was certainly helpful for me just to have a full review of all the things that, and tremendous amount of work that you've put in. I mean, clearly a tremendous amount of work. This is so challenging for so many different reasons. I think it's hard enough just to face the academic challenges that you deal with as your profession. But to have this added piece is really stunning for all of us to encounter. So I just thank you for the time from all of you and sharing all of your hard work and your planning. And I hope that we all remain flexible and stay in good communications with each other so that we can make this as successful as possible for everybody. So just thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and stay healthy, be well, and we look forward to being in touch again very soon. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Night.